Hello and welcome to episode 7 of the Unknot Your Future Self podcast. Today we're talking about grief, loss and all the things that surround that. So I'd just like to give you a bit of a trigger warning to let you know that it is a sensitive topic. We're still aiming to bring our sense of humour into it, but yeah, we hope you enjoy the show. Hello, Sarah Baker.
Hi, Em.
So we're on episode 7 and we're going to be talking about grief and loss, but I'm just wondering, how are you? How is life going for you?
Do you know what? Right. I actually am really good.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I am, I am. I've worked so hard to try and feel good, and I feel like I'm actually living it now.
Do you? Yeah.
It took me to the age of 40.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm with you. I'm 44. I am living. There's so many changes and things that I've been going through lately, which we will talk about at some point. But I feel the same. I feel like I've kind of had a bit of a rebirth. I'm not going to lie. I was a bit self-conscious about coming on and doing this as a video. I feel like my face is like a cross between my chin is like a cross between Bruce Forsyth's chin and fucking a Bernard Matthews turkey.
Gobble.
Yeah, exactly. Gobble, gobble. And honestly, I was like, last night I was really apprehensive going, I can't believe I've agreed to go on camera with the gorgeous Sarah Baker, which you're going to cringe now saying that.
Sarah Baker
but it's so true. And it's like kind of, yeah, but you look amazing. But then what it is like, it's kind of that thing, isn't it, where there's that song where it says, my giver fucks are on vacation. And that's kind of how we've got to do it. And we've got to practice what we preach, right? So today is going to be a bit of an episode, which can be like, it's going to be a bit, might feel a bit draining to people, but hopefully people will get something from it and really kind of be able to relate to it. But it's really good to be back. So today we're going to be talking about grief and loss and all the things that surround it. And I just wondered, why do you think in all of our personal development that's an important topic?
Oh my goodness. I think it's up there with some of the most important, because grief, especially, and loss, it's a part of life, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it happens to everyone. There's nobody in this life that doesn't
end up
have
in the
an
ground.
experience with that, So I think it's super important, and I think it can be really complex at times. And yeah, unspoken about. I think a lot of people wear a mask, which we talk about all the time. Because there's no rule book on how to deal with it. No,
there isn't. And I think that and we're going to go into some different experiences that people have had, and I've had consent from some of my coaching clients to share the details of some of their experiences. But actually, it's that idea, isn't it, that when we lose somebody or something, whether it's a pet, whether it's a person, actually, it's not always just at the time that we experience the grief. And obviously we know about things like the grief cycle and things like that. But actually it can come up at any time, can't it? And it can be triggered in so many ways. But all of a sudden, I think people find my experience when people talk about grief and loss is that the world moves on. Everyone around them moves on. And actually then it feels like inappropriate to then talk about it or to grieve or to then kind of express your emotion, right?
Yeah, because I think grief has layers, doesn't it? And I think with every milestone, every life event, every significant date brings about something different, and it depends where you're at in your life at that time, what you're reflecting on, what's going on, and it can hit you differently. And it's the unexpected, isn't it? And we always fear the unexpected and the unknown. So a lot of it's like the anticipation of how you're going to feel too. So I think it is really complex, and then I think it depends on the type of loss and the person you've lost, or what, not the person, because it's not always a person, isn't it? Loss doesn't just mean grief, does it? It doesn't just mean of a loved one. It can be a number of things.
Yeah, it can. And I know that obviously personally you've had your own experiences of grief and loss, and I know you've spoke about your brother on the show, and I think that one of the things that always astounds me, and obviously you'll talk about it now, is that especially working as a family therapist, I've found that the impacts on each family member is so different. And it's only years later, like I talk to some of my clients now and I'll give some examples, but it's only years later when you start to unpick it about how different that is for each of those siblings or those parents or the people that have gone through it as a family, but then everybody having their own kind of experience of it.
Yeah, because you often hear from some people kind of like, well, we all went through it, but we're all acting and responding so differently. And that's so common. I've got 2 younger sisters, and I was of an age where I was way more aware of things than they were. And I went into protect mode with them, whereas the youngest, you know, was 12 when so like she's responded completely different, and we've all had a completely different experience and journey with the same loss. And I think that's really, really common. And I think that's what makes it so isolating, even when you're all dealing with it, even in the same household, because you're still dealing with it differently. And I think we have to acknowledge men and women as well. We are different. We're not the same. And I think there are so many differences as well between men and women. So if you're in a couple and you're dealing with a loss, the dynamics to it are huge.
Yeah, they are. And I'm just going to point this out. I'm not trying to make something funny of something that's really serious. But
well, I mean, I wouldn't expect anything less, so point it out, hun.
Well, it's just that, like, I always think as well, I live a really authentic life. So I think that, or as much as I possibly can. And I always say, like my dad has got a list of the people that aren't invited to my funeral that I've said.
You've mentioned that before, actually.
Yeah, you categorically make sure that they're not coming. And my thing is that if you can't treat me nice while I'm alive, or you don't like me because you think I'm a knob, then you're not eating my buffet. Like, you are not attending my buffet on my funeral. And I always think that, I always imagine my funeral to be the sort of thing where people be like, yeah, she was all right, you know what I mean? But she was a bit of fucking hard work. And if you caught me whilst having a few glasses of Prosecco, then oh my God. And so I know that about myself. But then I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because that kind of send off the stuff around what we think about death and what we think about loss is really important. And I feel really strongly that they're not coming. They're not coming. And actually, I don't know whether that's a bit weird, but that's, I don't know anyone else who has a list of you're not allowed to come.
No, I don't think that's weird at all. I mean, we all have our own ideas of how
it's about authenticity, isn't it? That's my value.
Well, that's why I think that I want someone to record me performing a gig and get like a hologram of me performing at my own funeral and everyone raving.
I mean, I think that's a really good idea, and I think that will happen.
I probably will.
I think that will happen, and you'll be singing a bit of Paolo Nutini's 10 out of 10.
Exactly.
I think that's a great idea.
I agree.
So back to kind of what our audience is listening to, rather than my strange ways as a coach and therapist, is that the things that people have said to me. So I've done like a little bit of market research around this, market research being the wrong word, but whatever, we know what we mean. And people's experience have been really kind to share the experience and allow me to share information and breach confidentiality, basically. I'm not going to give postcodes and different dates of birth, but I will talk about the experiences. And someone was talking to me about the fact is that it's quite undignified when we lose a person, especially if it's a parent or somebody like that's really, really close. The loss is the loss, but then very quickly you are then kind of put into administrative gear. So all of a sudden you're trying to arrange things, do things, pay bills, and their experience of like kind of big corporate companies and organizations is that like they just don't care. Like, you're going through a grieving process and you'll ring up like kind of the gas board to say, my mum's passed away or my dad's passed away, this has happened. And they just don't seem to feel that it's kind of important. And I think what that person was saying was like, you that really impacts the grief. You know, the idea that it takes years to sort out an estate, to sort out all the stuff around it. It kind of takes away from the loss of the person and all of that grieving process, and is a headache in itself and can be really undignified. Have you heard that?
Yeah, it leaves no space for grief, does it? And I think at the beginning when you do have like a huge loss, there's lots of theories behind grief and loss, and like Elizabeth Kubler, I can never say your name, Kubler-Ross, said that wrong, but Google it. You'll spell it right then. She talks about like the 5 stages of grief, but it's known that there's like 7, because initially the first one's shock. And I think sometimes when your body goes into shock, you then go into autopilot to do all of these things. Yeah. But then people then think, oh, well, they're coping. Oh, well, no, they're doing what needs to be done. And then when are you supposed to step back and grieve? And I think there is a lot of pressure to get things done, and you have got to be the person, even though your world's falling apart.
And this person was saying that, like, even though the parent had sorted everything out, left like really explicit instructions, it still wasn't enough in terms of like all of that process, that nothing was easy. You know, it made the whole thing harder, which I can really relate to. My ex, his parents died together during COVID, and he's recently got letters from a solicitor where they'd had a will written a few years ago. The solicitor went bust, and then they've now obviously got back up and running. But in between time, the two parents have died, and they've sent them these letters this week saying, "Oh, we used to do your will. Do you want to like hook back up again?" And it's like, it's a good job that obviously he's not kind of still traumatized or kind of finding that difficult. But that's the sort of shit, isn't it, that people just don't need? Just a little reminder that somebody's not here or something's gone wrong.
Well, as you know, I work in a children's hospice, and you know, so the grief and the complexities and the trauma around what I work with on a weekly basis, some of the things I hear are horrendous. But one thing that I know, and I lived this also within my family setting, because my experience is similar to some of the people that I work with, although I'm a sibling, not a parent, in which I work with parents and siblings. I'm waffling. Anyway. So what happens is, especially if you have a child who's got like complex needs, additional needs of some sort, usually within that there's some sort of care package, or there's some sort of special adaptations in your home, or there's a mobility car. And in our case, there's like, you know, like an electric bed, all kinds of things, like comfy chairs, all different electric ones. And sometimes you get given a home which is adapted, which is only for as long as the child is.
Wow, yeah, absolutely.
So what, within 2 weeks of, and bear in mind, it was 20 years ago for us now, and there's a reason why I'm saying that, but within 2 weeks, you know, we're sitting in his room downstairs and people are knocking at the door, coming to take his bed, coming to try and take the car, coming to take the seat that my mum was literally sitting in. And then all of a sudden you've got a room that is filled with him, and then the next minute it's gone and it's empty, and we were all on the floor sobbing. And it must be awful for the people doing it, but they probably desensitize themselves because they do that.
Yeah.
And you're just there with full emptiness. And there's, you know, when you think about losing somebody and say going through their belongings, that takes time to do that. You're forced into it, and especially these parents who are losing children, you know, that's hard to even comprehend, isn't it? And these things are happening, and you've got to deal with that within such a short space of time. Not only that, you only get a short amount of time for finances when they stop, basically.
Yeah.
So you then got no money, you're grieving, you are unable to work, because how possibly do you even have the capacity to consider work? And your survival and your safety and security and shelter are being compromised. And then you've got to try and crack on. So they're the type of things that I hear regularly as well. A lot of people aren't even aware of that.
Absolutely.
But it's still happening now, and that's the point why
We've not moved on,
20 years ago. I still hear that now. It annoys me. It's really, really sad.
It is. And I think that, you know, just talking of young people, one of my clients, again, he gave me consent to share. He lost his son when his son was 5 years old, and he had two older children. And we were doing a coaching group not so long ago where we were talking about different things. And as a family therapist, you know that I work systemically. I talked about the family life cycle, and the family life cycle is all around kind of, you know, we're born, we have then a childhood, we then have kind of marriage, people coming in, we have loss, and what we call them is like kind of horizontal. Is horizontal across that way? Yeah. Horizontal stresses, and like an unexpected death would be classed as a horizontal stressor. And what they say in the theory, in the systemic theory, is that actually when that stressor occurs and that loss occurs, everybody in that system has to kind of then readjust. So they all get different roles. So for example, he was a dad to 3 children. He's now a dad to 2 children. So how well someone adjusts and readjusts to that role is then kind of a predictor of whether they then go on to struggle with their mental health or difficulties. How does one of the children who's left behind, how do they readjust because they were a brother of a brother and a sister, and now they've just got a sister? And so it's really important when we look at systemic theory about the impacts on other people. And what he found during this discussion was his eldest son was really struggling at the moment, who's like kind of in his 20s and had turned to like addictions and had turned to significant use. doing like a lot of people do, functional and doing everything they should be doing in life, but clearly struggling. And we explored the idea. And he said, we explored the idea of how well did he adjust when he lost his brother. And he was 13 when he lost his brother. And actually what the dad said is that for a full year, he said from the minute of finding out that the boy was poorly, the little boy, it was 6 weeks to the point of when he passed away. He said, and then the following year, it disappeared. He lost a year. He said he woke up on New Year's Day the following year because his son had died on New Year's Day. Woke up the following year and went, oh my God, like, how has it even been a year? And got his head out of it. And he'd been taking drugs every day. He stopped driving because he was always high, always drinking. And obviously we know, and you'll know this from your experience, that emotional unavailability to the rest of the family, whilst it can't be helped, has a huge impact on children, doesn't it? And having these discussions with him, he was like, I can't believe I haven't thought of this like up to now, that's self-soothing. What happened to my older son during that grief and loss process, how that might have impacted him now. And that's why we're seeing the repercussions of it all these years later, gone from 13 to in their 20s, now struggling. And actually it was a profound moment for him. He sent me a message afterwards saying, I can't believe that actually this has come up and I see this differently. I feel differently about my son and how he's struggling and how to deal with it. And I just that gives me goosebumps. I think that's amazing. But the idea that a whole family going through grief and that these impacts on each person and what that means in later life. And
I often describe my loss as when our Paul died, I didn't just lose Paul. And I lost my mum and my dad.
Yeah.
I lost most males in my life because Paul was the anchor, or he was the magnet that brought all them together, coming and playing gaming in the room with them, things like that. So I lost most males in my life. Mm-hmm. And everybody's viewpoint in which the, can't even speak, viewpoint or angle they looked at me from changed. And there was always this, that's the kid who's lost the brother. So I always had to act like, oh yeah, I know, and never knew how to be. And then being the eldest sibling, and naturally, of course, my parents were not my parents anymore in the way I knew them. I could see things for what they were, and I was like, oh, I'm going to have to take on this responsibility for everyone else. Yeah. Unconsciously. I didn't consciously do it. So yeah, it is. I think when in a family setting, it's not just about the loss. It's about the loss of life as you knew it. And it's the ripple effect of that. And that's why grief has so many layers, because the first couple of years, you're not in a position to reflect and try and understand and try and make sense of. And it might be 10 years later, it might be 20 years later. And that's what makes it so challenging. And equally as well, trying to adjust, as you mentioned earlier on, we went from a family of 6 to a family of 5. And it's the little moments like... when you're putting out dinner plates,
that's right,
and you put 6 out instead of 5, and you can't plan for those moments. And I remember that moment.
I bet they take your breath away.
It literally floors you, and you're there again on your knees, and you can't even put your dinner out. Or those moments, and this one makes me laugh, and I hope my mum doesn't mind me saying this, but sorry, Mum, it's too late.
She's fucking doing it anyway. She's doing it.
No, but you know what? So my parents are very different. So my dad would openly sit on a chair, get the pictures out, cry, and we'd be like, oh my God, which is usually different, isn't it? A different dynamic. Whereas my mum was very like, I'll go to my room and do it on my own. I probably won't talk about it that often unless forced into it, or and it was very much that we could talk about Paul in front of her, but the way she dealt with her emotions,
the grieving was done separately.
Yeah, it was very alone. And she came home one day, and it must have been about 4 or 5 months, right? And I think this is funny, but I mean, some people be like, wow,
we'll see. Maybe we need a gaugeometer when we post this on Instagram to say love or sad face.
No, it is funny, actually.
I think you've got to see, I think in grief there has got to be some funny sides, and just be, and before you finish that's one of the things that I always think is like, I remember going to a funeral, and I can't think of anything worse. I went to a cremation, and like, the fucking the curtain that goes round it was like like going round it like the slowest, and you're like, I'm saying goodbye to this person in a coffin and it's taking 5 minutes for the curtain to go around. And the humour in that is that this is awful, this is so awful, but actually this is so like life. So humour has to come into it. But go on, we digress. Tell us the story.
That's okay. So my mum went in like a shopping centre and was shopping and bumped into somebody who hadn't heard about our Paul. And she'd got to the point where she kind of couldn't talk about it anymore because, you know, it's really tough, of course. And this little old lady, oh, how are you doing? Oh, how's your Paul? And she went, oh yeah, he's fine. Thanks, love. He's doing all right. Yeah, okay, see you later. And she come home and she went, oh my God, Sarah. And what? She went, I've just told someone our Paul's all right. And I was like, Mum, you can't do that. And she was like, oh, well, I have. She went, I couldn't bring yourself to tell her.
Yeah.
But it is that, like, you get so in your head and you're not yourself anymore. You don't feel yourself anymore. Your esteem's rock bottom because you're not quite sure how you're going to behave in front of people. You're not sure whether you're going to put 6 plates out instead of 5. You're not sure whether someone's going to say a trigger word because you don't quite know what they are yet. And you have to just deal with it in the moment. And when you say you like to live authentically, sometimes it prevents you from being authentic. It's so difficult. But yeah, my mum told everyone he was fine.
Oh, God love her. Yeah. At least she noticed and came home and said that she'd done it. This old lady's still wandering about somewhere 20 years later going, I wonder how Paul is. Oh, God. I think, having spoken, and there's different things, isn't there? Because we'll come on to like pets and things like, child loss and stuff like that and baby loss is that, my mum was orphaned. So she was one of 3 children and orphaned like at an early age. So I think it was like 7 or 8 or stuff like that. And what's funny about the situation, not funny, is that we haven't lost anybody at this stage, and what happens with family scripts is, for my mum growing up and us growing up, well, everyone was dead. Like, you had no grandparents, everyone's dead. And that becomes your family script. So then you live by the fact that, we're lucky that we've made it past, because they died in their 30s. We're lucky that we've made it past our 30s, right? And it becomes a family script. And that idea of loss and what does loss then kind of filter into the family, that we're lucky that we've lived, we're lucky that we're kind of healthy. And almost even that's a negative, because what that does is I often have this like compulsion. If someone doesn't turn up on time, to say like Adam this morning with his videos coming here, who's meant to be here at 8:30. Like, the first thing that enters my head is that, I wonder if he's dead. Like, that's not normal, is it? And I'm thinking, I hope he's not dead. Bit irrational, but let's see. And then I spoke to him and he came and that was fine. And I'm laughing about it because that isn't unusual. That's what I think often. And that is the repercussions of what it's like to lose in a family when you've got children who are orphaned, whose then family script is passed down, that loss is huge. So you haven't even experienced it yourself, but you think everyone's dying. I've got used to you and your timekeeping now, so I never think that you're dead. I always think that she's just on her way. But it's funny, isn't it? So to other people, that would be like weird to think that they're dead.
Yeah, but it's not. And I relate to that because I learned at a young age that people can die young, and you don't know that when you're younger.
No.
It's a huge shock to the system, therefore it hits you like a huge trauma.
Yeah.
And I've already said this before, I think, but, good old Google, when I was 14, brand new computer in the home. I'm ancient, it was one of those first time getting a computer in the home. And I Googled my brother's condition when I was 14. And he had Duchenne muscular dystrophy. And I read that he was only going to live until his early 20s. So I spent from the age of 14 living with anticipatory grief. And that's kind of what it is, the anticipation of death, of losing someone you love. And it's torturous. And
it's like always thinking about the when and
the
what
when
the time
and the
is.
And the fear of, I won't want to live when that happens.
Yes.
I won't be able to cope.
Yeah.
What if that happens? That the thought of even entertaining
Did you used to think that? Is that what you would think?
I literally would fixate on it, and I'd be like, I'm not going to be able to survive that. I'm not going to be able to cope when he dies. And I never spoke to anyone about it. So I lived with it, just ruminating through my brain for 4 years. And my mum told me about how she's had this reoccurring dream since she was younger, actually, before she even had us. And there was a young person in the bed dying, and there were people, loved ones. There were no faces. It was just someone in the bed with dark hair, and there were loved ones around the bed, with like silent tears, and one of them was like stroking the person's head as they were dying. And my mum, obviously, because it's hard to interpret dreams, but my mum thought that was her, and she knew the person was young. So my mum feared most of her life that she was going to die young.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. And she told me about, I can't remember what the conversation came about anyway. She told me about that. About the dream, not that she was going to die young, because that would have scared me, but she told me about the dream. And she told me about it in the December. And Paul died in the January.
Right.
And I remember the next day just looking at my mum, and I went, "Mum, you dream?" And she went, "I know."
Yeah.
And she anticipated death, early death, her whole life. And she might not have voiced that out loud to us, but we will have picked up on it. We will have sensed it. And then with Paul dying so young, we all learned then really young that people die young. You know, it doesn't matter on your age. And that's a really scary thought, especially to an underdeveloped brain.
Yeah.
And then it can bring about such health anxieties,
huge
that's right, waves of fear. The slightest moment that may seem normal to one person, who can just stay completely in the rational mind and just be like, "Oh yeah, they'll probably late or stuck in traffic. They'll be here soon." It's literally because your brain's constantly scanning for any type of threat or danger, and if that's within your memories, then it's gonna be like, "Oh, what if?" You know, and I now have this thing where I cannot leave my house without saying, "I love you, see you later," or giving a kiss. And sometimes I find it really hard, you know, say if you've had, like, you fell out or you've had a bit of a...
in case something happens to someone.
Where I leave and I think, "Oh, I can't let that be my last words." And that's the type of thing that I think all the time. You know?
I agree. And in many ways, although it's frustrating to you, it's also a strength as well, isn't it? Because I agree. Like, I never, you have crosswords with people, but it is in your mind that you would never want it to end. And I always remember my dad when my nan passed away, which was my stepdad's mum. And he said, like, he didn't feel a lot of the things that people feel in grief because he felt really satisfied that he'd always, like, kind of done the right thing, said the right thing at the right time when he needed to. So he didn't look back and kind of make regrets. But one of the things that people speak to me about is like that guilt and that level of guilt. Did they do enough? Did they say enough? Did they tell people that they loved them? Did they kind of reach out? And unfortunately for some people, they don't get the chance to, do they? No. And I think with grief, when you people ask me about grief therapy, and I always advise that, there's a lot of organisations that call themselves bereavement therapy, and there is a separate kind of part of that training, isn't there? But as somebody who trained as a person-centred therapist at the core, we can actually talk to anybody. Like it's but what happens is that people think that they'll go get some counselling, but actually early on when somebody's kind of grieving, counselling isn't really the answer, is it? Because actually it's just that whole support. But I wonder as well, is there a difference between losing people at particular ages? Someone said to me, you do not expect to outlive your children.
No.
And I wonder, like, kind of how different that is than when we have elderly parents or older parents where that grief and loss is still as equally as important, but processed in a very different way, right?
Yeah, I think in terms of part of the grief process, acceptance is a massive part of it, because before that there's like the bargaining, isn't it? There's the what could I have done differently, the guilt, all the processing of it all, the reflecting on all the interactions you had with the person. There's so much to it.
And especially when there's been, like if people have had adversity, so like people where there's been abuse in the families and they've never got to kind of voice it, it's never been settled, or they've never had that conversation, and then someone passes away and it's like they're never going to get to have that kind
all
of...
the missed opportunities,
exactly,
all the unspoken words.
Yeah.
There's nowhere for that to go, is there?
Yeah.
But I think, what was I saying? Where was I up to? I was saying, the layers to it. And I was talking about accepting. I think when it's like, say, an older person who's lived a full life, and it's the natural order of life, let's say.
Yeah, on the family life cycle.
Then there is a part of that you kind of can accept. There's a huge sadness around it. Yeah. Grief, loss, all the pain that comes with it. Adapting to life without that person. I'm not.
We're not minimising it now.
But there's another layer when it's not the natural order of life, because
That's
it
right.
doesn't make sense.
Yeah, yeah.
It's cruel, it's unfair,
Feels personal,
it's
I guess, in some
unkind,
ways.
it's personal. There are so many things. So before you can even get to any part of grieving the loss, it's why and how. And again, it's part of the bargaining, but sometimes that process is a lot longer, because how are you meant to accept that? Your brain can't accept that. That is so unfair that happened.
Yeah.
It's so cruel. And then what you tend to live as well is like an added layer of all the missed moments, all the shoulda, woulda, couldas, and
That's it, yeah.
and all the times that you would hope to have had together, and then you have to go through the milestones of their life that they were denied. And so it just brings about a different layer, a different level of thinking. And I'm not here to compare and contrast, because it's not about that. Trauma is trauma, grief is grief, and pain is pain. And each person is valid in their feelings. And it's not about saying, well, I'm feeling this, well, you're feeling that, you've got it worse. It's absolutely not. It's like, you're feeling that and you're entitled to feel that, and let's not compare to anybody else. However, let's look at the different types.
Absolutely.
To help people feel understood when they're going through that. And that's what this is about. And I think it's devastating. And I think as a therapist, when you're working with that, it's so challenging, because it's not something that you can fix. You're never going to be able to fix it.
I think that's the difficulty, isn't it?
Yeah, the only thing they want is that back. And the only thing they want, they can't have. And it's like, I don't want nothing else then.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
hard.
I remember an elderly lady many years ago coming to me for therapy. It was quite unusual, because she was in her 80s, and we don't really see clients in their 80s coming for therapy. And she'd come to me because she'd lost her husband. And there was this initial, well, you see, look what you just did.
Go on.
So there was this initial thing, which was like,
Sad.
poor old lady, sad. And actually what she was coming for was because he'd been an absolute arsehole the whole of her life. He'd beat her. He'd, up until the point of his death, he was restricting toilet paper, shit like that. I'd pardon the pun. You know, and actually what she was doing was processing what it feels like to think, thank fuck he's gone. Like,
Wow.
sorry, listeners, that's really harsh,
so
isn't it? But I
empowering.
imagine that woman wasn't on her own and isn't on her own. She'd suffered for years, clearly loved him, clearly there were parts of him, but he was a torment on her life. And when he went, she was processing grief around what it feels like to think, ding dong, the witch is dead, right?
Oh my
because
God,
and we have to remember that,
in.
because look at your immediate response. We go, don't we, straight away to losses. And I'm not saying
I
someone
was
should be
thinking,
dead.
because I was thinking 80, going to therapy, like there's something around wanting a better life. So I go, meaning like, but again, there probably was a part of me that was thinking, alone. But then, and she is alone, but in a different way.
And what does that life beyond the grief, and what does all of that before the grief kind of signify? And it signifies for her, she was angry that she put up with it for so many years, angry that she could have been free, that she'd kind of done things in that way. Interestingly, just to add some more inappropriateness to the conversation, because I always do, and you know that I like this, is that I always remember my dad telling us a story about one of his friends, and this guy, you know, like we lived in Skem, so it was like really scout, and it's like, all right, lads, how's your fucking nut? And he's like, she's dead. She's dead. and like those things that then when you add humour to grief and go, so we always say like now on our group of family chat, like, oh, they're fucking dead. You know what I mean? And it's like just to kind of add that humour. And we have a family group chat, I don't know whether you do, but like I am basically the Grim Reaper, so I deliver the news of deaths of celebrities all the time, and that people try to pit me to the post, to the role, and quite often someone will go, too late, you missed it. And do you know what? I'm not laughing at the death. I'm not laughing at the fact that somebody's died, but what I am doing is kind of like bringing up-to-date news to the family group chat of a fashion that kind of people need to know these things, but there's humour to it, and it's not humorous. And when you talk about like kind of those different ages, that kind of self stuff around why did this happen? And also I think this kind of thing of where have they gone? Where have they gone? They were here. Where are they now? And how hard is it, I wonder, and you will be able to answer this as well, but like how hard is it to think about, well, where are they? Like, where actually are they? And I'm sure a lot of people have shared that. And how do you come to that acceptance that, but they're not here, but where are they else?
Do you know what I used to do? And apologies if I've said this before. I remember the weeks after our Paul dying, I would go to the toilet or get a shower and be like, I need to cover myself up in case he's see watching me. Yeah. And I remember I heard a noise upstairs, and I was coming out the bathroom and I was looking around thinking, is that our Paul?
Yeah.
Is he here? Because there is that whole, well, where is he? Is he still with us? Is he not? Where is he? And I think it depends on your beliefs as well, doesn't it?
And this brings me to a really important part of what I've spoken to a lot of the people about around like clairvoyancy and afterlife. And you might have some thoughts on this, but actually a lot of people find themselves kind of going down that route, going to clairvoyance and people who claim to kind of speak to those that we've lost, and how much, like, for some people that can be really healing because they get to hear messages or they get to hear things. Or they get to be validated, but also for a lot of people, like, doing that and going down that route where actually you don't hear something, or actually, and it's that kind of clutching at straws in the hope that somebody will come through or let you know that they're okay. Because actually for a lot of people, Sarah, they're saying that the people that I talk to say that that's what they worry about is the person okay? Where are they? And almost things like clairvoyancy, they go to those things because they're like, actually, I just want to know that they've made it somewhere, or they're all right. And isn't that, like, that feels sad to me, but almost like kind of must be cathartic if people do get messages, even if they're not, you know, we don't know if that's true or not, but actually for people that must feel really validating sometimes.
It does. And I think in my case, I mean, I've experienced multiple losses. You know, before I was 19, I'd been to something like 12, 13 funerals.
That's quite a lot, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean,
did you do that thing though where you thought you worried that he was not okay?
Well,
where he was?
So I did reflect upon like death and dying, like from a young age, sadly, and when with our Paul, obviously, because although he was able to communicate his experiences just like you and I, obviously his body wasn't the way ideally we would have loved it to have been, and he had a nice life. He had a lovely life for what he was given, and he was a huge role model and a massive inspiration to me. But you know, he lost the use of being able to walk, and then he lost the use of his body, and there was lots of obviously traumas around that.
Real-time grief and loss in the moment, right?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And when he died, we used to, thankfully, we got to say goodbye, and his death was peaceful. And that whole thing, because of anticipated grief, because my parents knew, they made sure that we loved hard. You know what I mean? And I'm really grateful for that. But afterwards, I used to think, like, where is he? Is he okay? Can he walk? Is he happy? Is he, you know, does he have the use of his body now? Can he play football now?
Because he loves
football,
like,
is he
physically?
Happy? Yeah, do you know what I mean? Like all of those unanswered questions. And I actually went with me mum, me auntie and cousin to one of those spiritualist church. And sometimes I feel like I'm repeating myself, because me and you have so many conversations. We're deep, aren't we?
We're deep. We're very deep. We go deep.
So yeah, speaking about like clairvoyance and stuff, I went to a spiritualist church with my mum, auntie, cousin, and weren't expecting anything from it. Kind of didn't want to go, but went along anyway. And I remember some of the things that was said. Our Paul came through. My mum had done her hair before. Have I told you this? My mum had done her hair before we'd left, and she was standing next to me dad in the mirror, and she goes, "Oh well, Paul, like this. If you come through, you better say you like me hair, like that."
Wow.
When we were there, the medium, said, "Have you always had your hair like that?" I never knew this, by the way. He said he likes your hair.
My
mum was like, "Oh my God, yeah." Then another thing was, he got his last rites the day before he died, and they confirmed him. And obviously, you know, my family love Liverpool Football Club, and they confirmed him. His name's Paul Allen, and after Allen's my dad's name, and Paul Allen Stephen after Stephen Gerrard, because Stephen Gerrard came in to see him the night before he died. And I just forgot about that moment, because why would I think of that again? And she said, "Oh, he loves his name, by the way." And Stephen, I was thinking, I haven't got a clue what she's on about, because I forgot about that. I'd written a song, because, you know, I like to sing. And me dad had played the song to my uncle when we got there before my mum and I left. And I was going, "Dad, stop it, you're embarrassing me." He said, "Has someone written him a song? He loves it." All these things that no one could have known.
Which feel really validating.
Oh my goodness. And she said, "He's healthy, he's got a football under his arm and he's walking." And then she said, "Was he in a wheelchair?" She just went past me. Oh my God, I never knew how much I needed that. But the thing is, I know people don't get that as well, and there's a flip side of that.
There's a danger in it, isn't there? There's a danger.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I knew not to keep going, because I knew I could have lived in that and wanted that continuously.
Yeah. Absolutely. And, I was just thinking then, when you say about like getting your last rites and your confirmation, I reckon I'd be laid there like getting confirmed. Yes, I can confirm she's still a twat. And she's going to hell, but let's give her one last moment to redeem all of these things she's ever said and done to everybody. No, just joking. But I think that, and it's a really important topic because I think people do, I think what it tells me and reconfirms all of the time, and I think like you said before, we're going to need to do another episode on this because it's so big. It doesn't capture anything that we need to capture. But it shows that individuality of the grief process that, how can you say to somebody who has lost babies, who have lost pregnancies, who have lost, really important pets and things like that. And I know people might get mad about me saying that, but we don't get the right to say to people whether their grief is acceptable or not, or what they do. And I think collectively, we speak often in psychology about socially constructed kind of ideas around mental health, and it's the idea that we create our own misery, and we often create our own misery and mental health problems in life because we don't accept people, we judge the levels of grief, we tell people that they can't grieve. And I always remember this guy coming, he'd lost his mum, and he was so upset, and I rang his doctor and was like, listen, I think there's something we do. And she was like, and the woman was like, listen, we should not be pathologizing grief. And although I hated what she said, actually she was right, that although it's the most unfortunate and horrible thing, it is exactly what you said before, this kind of part of life that we are not escaping, are we? No. We are not escaping. And I think, when you look at people like, it was that fella who does the stuff with Ricky Gervais, Carl Pilkington, and he does like a series on life and death. And you know what? It was brilliant, Sarah, because it was showing you all the different cultures and all the different things that people do. And our society and our culture in the UK is really very weird about grief as well, and how we manage it, and some of those processes that take ages. But I guess bringing it full circle is that how do, people listening now who are going through grief, loss, pain, how do they actually help themselves? Because this is what we've done the episode for. And is it as cut and dry? Can people help themselves?
I think yes. Yes, they can. I think yes. Yes, they can, but not in the way you would expect. It's not, oh, this is the rule book and this is what you do. Yeah. I think helping yourself is allowing yourself to feel your way through your grief, allowing time. And that's an annoying thing I hear a lot. People don't want to even acknowledge time, because time's a funny thing with grief, whole different conversation. Allowing yourself the time to grieve and allowing yourself to feel more into your body and not with your head, because we think so much and we analyse ourselves so much. Is this normal? Is that normal? Should I be feeling this? Why am I feeling that? Yeah. And then external people, well, you need to be doing this. Well, you need to be doing that. Yeah. No, you need to be true to yourself. Yeah. You need to honour your own feelings. You need to allow yourself time for different processes, because some of them can be so conflicting. You can have one extreme thought about this, and then in the next breath think breath, think that about that, and you need to give yourself time to sit with both of those processes as well. So I think it's time and allowing yourself to feel your way through it, because there is no quick fix, because you've now got to build your life around your grief.
That reconfiguration of the roles, that readjustment. And I think, I always say this, I'm like a broken record, aren't I? But I think that who you've got around you is really important. If you've got a load of dickheads around you who want you to rush that process, or feel like, I've had that conversation with people where people say they're not entitled to grieve. They didn't get on with someone, or they didn't, so then they shouldn't be grieving them, which is just BS, really, isn't it? And I think you need the right people around you to be able to say like kind of what you need to say, right? And to feel how you need to feel, and to sit in those spaces, but know that you will come out the other end, know that there is an end to this. And it might not be the same things. I think sometimes, like losing Paul, your life was never the same again. And it was completely affected by all of the ongoing grief and loss that he had while he was alive. And I suspect a lot of people will be able to relate to that. And then people who have lost their parents at a later age and stuff, I think that they've got a whole lifetime of stuff to look back on and regret or feel guilty about, relaying conversations in their head, wanting to do them proud now in life, and never really getting to see kind of the things that change or do better, and or their grandchildren and stuff like that grow. So it's massive, isn't it?
It really is. And as you say, we do need to continue this further in our next episode, because there's so many more topics and layers and levels to this, isn't there?
And for now, I think what I would say to people is, that I'm not pro or anti-medication. I am pro combined and whatever works for an individual. But if you're really, really suffering as a listener and you are really kind of struggling to get over things, don't sit in silence. I think that's the worst thing that you can do. I think getting help and not being embarrassed or ashamed to admit that you're struggling at any point of the grief process, it could be years down the line, couldn't it, that something just gets triggered. And I think that that's what we have to start as a society to start to realise. There is no timeline on this, but really understanding as somebody who may be watching someone go through grief and loss, that there's nuances to the grief and loss, that it isn't exactly what you just think it is, right?
No, absolutely. It's always completely opposite to what you think it is in many ways, not all.
And I just want to say to you, one of the funniest things that you ever told me about Paul, if it's okay to say, you can tell me if we need to wipe it, but that there was fun times. You had so much fun with him as a young family. And I always remember the story that you told me about when he was in the electric wheelchair and you and the other girls, because obviously he had 3 sisters, didn't he? Who would rob his battery out of his chair and hide it. And I just, when you first told me, I was like, oh my God, that would be abuse now, wouldn't it, if we were looking at it? But actually, how important is it to reflect and think about those happy and amazing memories that, made him part of that sibling group that keeps his memory alive. And I'm so grateful to you for over the years sharing the stories with Paul, because I know it's not been easy, but also kind of bringing it to listeners in a way that kind of honours the complexity of grief, but also kind of celebrates life, as it is and as it was.
I got through without shedding a tear, and the lumps.
You did.
Lumps right here now after that. Thank you for saying that.
Oh, you're welcome. And I love you. Yeah. Oh, we did that. Jinx, you see, that's the sort of thing. Yeah. So what I want to say is, just outwardly of this, if you need anything, obviously you can reach out to us, but we're not available all of the time. So please don't kind of reach out and then wait for us if you need something. But next time we're going to talk about body dysmorphia. We've spoken about image and stuff like that, but I think this is a topic that's coming up all the more and more. And I think actually our next episode, we kind of want to dig a bit deeper into body dysmorphia, some of the things that we're experiencing. So join us next time for the body dysmorphia podcast or episode. Body dysmorphia episode. Thank you. See you soon. Bye.